Don't own the account. Excellent.
Okay, good. I think we can get started. I will have introduce Rinola, the president of my events coordinator. She will be able to guide us today. We'll go ahead and introduce the speaker for tonight. But this is a great time that we are happy to connect with the Links Incorporated and the Online School of Business, but also everyone else in the community in St. Louis. We are honored to have you tonight. And I hope throughout your conversation, we'll be able to help something and be help each other and be able to help our community. Over to
Absolutely.
Arinola.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. And so excited to have you back, Gisele. It's exciting.
I have missed you all. I haven't been here in a little while.
I see a lot, many of our friends here from the Actuate chapter of the Links. You're welcome, and thank you for joining us, and many of our friends in the community. Well, it's a pleasure to introduce our esteemed guest, who is not a stranger to many of you, Gisele Marcus. And I must tell you, she's not new to us in any way. Gisele is an incredible supporter of Nintendo for Africa, and for years, this woman has offered mentorship, advocacy, supporting our community initiative, many of our women empowerment sessions we've had. She's been there. She's a great community connector and, champion of the community, so to speak. In addition to her significant leadership role with the Actual Links Incorporated, Gisele has really participated in many of the partnership that we had in the past. The one that really sticks to mind is the speaker series where we bridge the gap between the African and the African American community. That was a very popular discussion that we had, and it healed and brought that closeness in our relationship. So I want to thank you, Gisele, and the Links chapter for bringing that as well to us. But I also like to acknowledge many of our friends here. I've mentioned the Links Incorporated Actual chapter. We have people from the Orlean Business School. You're welcome. And the Missouri Career Development Association as well. You're welcome. Family from Nintendo for Africa, the African Chambers. You are all welcome to tonight's important discussion. Let me introduce Gisele, just a little bit about her. Gisele currently serves in the dual role as the Vice Dean of the Office of EDI and a professor of practice at the Orlean Business School at Washington University here in St. Louis. She serves on the board of directors of First Made Bankshares Incorporated. Gisele has been a 5-time general manager at Fortune 250 companies, including Thermo Fisher Scientific, AT&T, and Johnson Controls, leading organizations up to 800 million in profit and loss, with 1,200 employees globally across 40 countries and 5 continents. As a TEDx speaker, Gisele is known to deliver knowledge and practical tips to her audience on the intersections of DEI and networking. She has been featured in the BBC Huffington Post and Black Enterprise. Most recently, she has been a repeat guest on the Fox-affiliated Good Morning St. Louis talk show. We are so excited, Gisele, to have you. And I know you're going to do justice to this conversation. So warm welcome. Over to you.
I thank you so much for that very warm introduction. Even though it's virtual, I can feel all the love in the room. So I love partnering with Nintendo for Africa. It's always been a delight and a pleasure. So thanks for having me back. And I want to I'm just excited because we're also here celebrating International Women's Day, as well as International Women's Month. So it is a great month, the month of March. And I am thrilled that you all were interested in this topic that I'm going to share with you today in regard to microaggressions. So let me share my screen with you. Let's see if I can get this over there. Yes. Mouse doesn't want to cooperate. Here we go. Okay. Um, so it's okay. We'll do it this way. Can you see my screen okay? I don't hear anyone.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, great, 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 great. So the topic for today's discussion is unpacking microaggressions, awareness, action, and change. So to get us started, I want to just begin with a brief, I need to actually show the whole thing here, but that's okay. Would someone be willing to at least read what a microaggression is? We're going to focus specifically today on racial microaggressions. Would someone just volunteer to read what a microaggression is here on the screen?
Sure, I will.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't unmute fast.
Yeah, I couldn't do my mute. Okay. Racial microaggressions are brief and commonplace daily verbal, behavioral, and environmental indignities, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative racial slights and insults towards people of color. Those who inflict racial microaggressions are often unaware that they have done anything to harm another person.
Yes, so that is the definition of a microaggression, and they can be intentional, they can be unintentional. So those are two key things that I want us to focus on today. And I have a few video vignettes for you this evening, and they're all very short. So this is going to give you an opportunity to have some virtual participation. Now let me pull up the link for that. Hopefully I can. Let's see. Do I have them here? Yes. So they're going to go really quick. So I'm going to ask you to keep your eyes and ears open and let me make sure we have good volume. So here is one example of a microaggression. And after you watch it, I'm going to ask you two questions. What might be, how might this have happened? There's going to be one question. And the other question is going to be, what might be wrong with it? Because oftentimes when we experience microaggressions, they can be intentional, they can be unintentional, and sometimes the person that's hearing it may not necessarily be offended by it. So here is the first example.
Hey, is that Cindy over there?
I don't know who that is.
Man, I can't tell Asians apart.
Can't tell Asians apart. I've been hearing that my whole life. That means you don't see me. We're not all the same, you know.
Were you all able to hear that?
Yes.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. All right. So let's start with what could be, how could this have happened? So for example, what I mean is it appears that the two of these people seem a little friendly, right? They're at the gym, right? And my question to you is, how might this happen without it being intended to be harmful in any way? How might that occur?
I would say feeling comfortable with the person, or maybe you have those times where people are like, oh, I don't see color, or I don't see you as what you identify as, so they don't think that what they're saying is racist or sexist or anything because they don't view you as what you are.
Exactly. So oftentimes, you know, people, like Jetta said, sometimes people say, oh, I don't see color, you know, which I always tell my students, are we sure about that? Right? Because if you see me, you can see there is a color associated with me, right? Of course. Now, the other question is, why might the young lady be offended by this?
Because like she said, like, you don't see me. But
Right.
I'm just a a blur or something like that. I'm not sure.
Right. So basically, he basically said, I didn't recognize who that was because, all Asians look alike. Right. So what's happening, which is oftentimes a challenge with racial microaggressions, is someone may paint a group of people, a person, right, with a group of people with one paintbrush, right, saying these people are all alike. And whenever you hear that, or whenever someone says that, that's often an indicator that they are grouping people together, which gets into that category of stereotyping a group of people, right? Um, and I'm sure, but I would think that people that are part of the Asian community would probably disagree with that, right? They wouldn't think that they all look alike, for example. But the challenge with this becomes, as Jetta said, sometimes people are just super friendly. So they think it's okay. That could be one thing. Or it could just be that the person who said it had no idea they could be offensive at all, right? So sometimes that can actually happen as well. The other thing that we're going to talk about, as we have this session tonight, is how do we actually address these microaggressions? So if we see this in the workplace, or we hear, and maybe not even in the workplace, it could just be our common day-to-day things that we do. How might we handle that? But I'm going to show you the next one.
Hand-battered North Atlantic cod with savory tartar sauce. Crispy butterfly jumbo shrimp with signature cocktail sauce.
I'm not ollieing high enough.
You're getting it, though.
I need to tighten my trucks more and lift my back foot higher. I could do better.
Man, you're not like the other black dudes I know.
Not like other black dudes. Does he really think all black guys are alike? I'm tired of hearing that. Pass me that?
Yeah.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, why might this be a microaggression? What might be wrong with this particular vignette?
Okay, I'll answer it. Somebody will. And I don't want to say it's similar to the I don't see color, but it's one of those like I don't associate you with what I think your race is. So it could be a stereotype like, oh, you're not normal black person. Don't act this way. So
Right, could be, right? Yes. Anything else about what might be challenging about this particular vignette?
I think him saying it that way, it's good enough because you're trying to do something that's different from this group of people. So he doesn't see the skill, it just sees the effort. You're just good enough just because you're stepping out of the box of this assumption that he's had about Black people.
Yes, yes, yes. So he said, hey, you're not like other Black people I know, right? Not like the Blacks I know. Someone, Dr. Chakaranian, I may be pronouncing your name totally wrong, and I apologize, says it puts one person in charge of representing an entire group of people, assuming they all share the same characteristics. Exactly, right? And we always want to be careful of that. But again, we have a situation here where it's possible that the gentleman that made the comment didn't think it was a problem because it seems like they're friends, right? Because after he said it, the gentleman on the bike said, hey, can you pass me that tool so I can actually tighten up my skateboard, right? So it does seem also like they may be friends, right? And one question that I have for you, they don't explore that in this particular vignette or in the previous one, but what might be some ways to address microaggressions when they happen? Any suggestions on that? Well, let me give you one way that I'll start us off by saying, let me give you one way that I tell my students, because oftentimes the person that may feel offended may not know what to say right away, right? And sometimes if you're friends, it might feel uncomfortable, right? To try to correct your friend, potentially, right? So I suggest to my students, one way of doing this is you start it off with a question, right? So you could say simply, what did you mean by that? Just to get under and be curious in your tone and see what the person says, right? And then you can really begin to unpack it from there. Sometimes people may use humor, right? If it's someone that's quick-witted, I have one on here that I'm going to share a reaction that I had from a student that I thought was pretty funny. And then the other challenge becomes sometimes, not sometimes, but usually such microaggressions can be two-sided. You know, some of us, like when I look at it initially, I immediately say, well, that's offensive. That's a stereotype, right? But it's very possible that someone else looks at this and doesn't see anything wrong with it, right? So that's something else that we have to keep in mind as we unpack it. And if you said to the gentleman who stated, you're not like other Black guys I know, and you said to him, you know, what did you mean by that? And once he unpacks that, you may see maybe he didn't mean any harm, or maybe it also could be an unconscious bias that he has and doesn't even realize that he has that, right? Okay. Let's share the next one with you. Hopefully we don't get a commercial this time, but let's see.
Introducing 2 new Baja Chipotle subs featuring our world-famous Baja Chipotle sauce. Listen.
By the way, I got in.
Oh my God, where?
Columbia.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
How'd you get into that school?
How did I get into that school? Does she think I'm not smart enough? And don't bring up affirmative action. I've earned this.
Okay. So, how did you get into that school? Let's unpack that one. How could someone be looking at this and say, I don't necessarily see a problem with it? What perspective might they be coming from? Because we should always try to look at it from both sides. Any takers?
This is Ingrid. How a person could look at this and not see a problem is, how did you get into that? I mean, she might have been asking, well, you know, did you take the ACT, the SAT? You know, what was your package that you put together to get in? Not that you're not capable of getting in. It's just like, which package did you use?
Yes.
And so sometimes with people making statements and you address them as this person did, as if she were offended, sometimes that other person will come back and say, look, I was just wondering, you know, did you use the SAT or ACT to get in?
Mm-hmm.
That's all where this came from. So, yeah.
That could be it. Or it could be, generally, you know, Columbia is one of the top schools, right? It's an Ivy in our nation. And it could just really be a curious question like, you know, wow, you know, you got it. How did you do that? Curiously, right? But what's the flip side of that, potentially? What's the other side of the coin?
Could be a microaggression of, you know, you're a minority, or maybe I don't feel like your grades are good enough, or maybe I feel like I did better on the ACT or SAT than you, and I didn't get into this. So what, you know, is there something behind that?
Right. Yes, exactly. So it could be somewhat of a slight, you know, how could you get in? Potentially saying, you know, you are a brown person. How could you get into Columbia? Right. And I would say I've actually had that happen to me, and I was offended by it. Because I do have an MBA from an Ivy League school, and I did have a colleague once say to me, "Hey, I heard that you went to Harvard Business School. Is that true?" And I said, "That's an interesting question." And what I wanted to ask, because I said, yes, I said, it is true. I said, does that surprise you? With a smile, right? And she said, no, it doesn't surprise me at all. I said, okay. I said, well, and this is just because I felt I knew her well enough. And I said, I could be really offended by that, right? Meaning that maybe you think I'm not smart enough to get in, that you're surprised I got in, right? So it could be both sides of the coin. And what I tell my students to do, again, be curious, try to unpack it. And sometimes it's better if you're a bystander, meaning if you're someone on the outside looking in. So if you're someone that saw that, you could also come in and make a comment and say, tell me a little bit more about that, right? Or you could use some humor with that, right? And it could be something to say, why do you ask? Does that surprise you? Right? For example. So there's many ways that you can come at it, but what I would suggest is, if we hear it, we should try to address it if we're comfortable to do it, right? And oftentimes the person who's offended may not be comfortable to do it because they feel like they're being targeted, so to speak. So sometimes they may feel a little frozen, which is why I suggest you can come at it with a question. And I see here, okay, Dr. Hasmick says, I have easily been like, how did you study and do so well on your application? Yes. What references did you secure that help your application, etc.? Exactly. So it could be looked at from that perspective as well. But what we have to remember is someone could be offended, someone may not be offended, right? But we have to keep in mind that being offended is a possibility, right?
Sure.
So that if we could try to maybe avoid something like that. Jetta, I see your hands up.
Yeah, so I had a question about the questions. Do you have any types of questions you prefer and any you should stay, like you recommend staying away from? And the reason why I ask that is, like, one thing my husband is always saying is like, oh, you shouldn't like lead with why questions because it kind of puts people on defense. So like, why did you do this can be defensive versus like, how are those like, curious types of questions?
Good question. So I've never necessarily said to my students, don't do this, don't do that. So I don't usually say this is safe because and I hate to use this, right? Because it just kind of depends on the context, right? Because like you said, someone may find why offensive, someone may not find why offensive, right? How could be softer depending. But it just depends on how it lands with the person who you're posing the question to. So Jetta, I don't necessarily have a ironclad, always do it this way or always do it that way. The only always that or should I say close to, because always is so inclusive, right? But the one that I have found where people feel more comfortable is what did you mean by that? With a curious tone. Because I can say, well, what did you mean by that? With an attitude, right? So it's also how you said it, not just what you said.
Thank you.
But thank you, Jetta. That's a really good point. I would love to hear a little bit more about what you were saying about being coached around, be careful about saying why versus how. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yes, so like that was my default, like why didn't this happen or why didn't you do X, Y, and Z? And instead of like saying like how did you come to the decision to make this move, or like how did you come to that decision versus being like why did you do that? And sometimes it can be like, oh my gosh, I'm just like I don't know, and you can put people on defense or just get them riled and startled versus like you said, softening it a little bit. Asking those questions that'll get them a little less defensive. and
Yes.
more inclined to really have an open conversation.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up, because to your point, why could just seem accusatory potentially,
Exactly.
right? But how could too, depending on how you say how. But how in a curious voice seems less harsh, I would say. Aranola.
Yes, I agree with a lot of the suggestion that's been said earlier. I know a few years ago when my son got into U Chicago, a friend came, approached me and said, "Oh, how did he get in? Was it by affirmative action?" And I looked at him with shock horror, like this boy scored like 35 on his ACT. I would expect him to be offered, a position at a school with all the other extracurricular activities that he does. And he was like, "Oh, okay." So it was a conversation we had, and he's a good friend of mine. So I was kind of offended, but also gave me an opportunity to have a discussion that, look, not every achievement is, based on some race-based policy that they had at the school. This is something he worked for and he deserved.
I love it. Yes. And sometimes you just have to, and you said that so lovely, so calm. And I believe that also helps, right?
Yes.
But sometimes we may, if we're offended, right, we may be harsh with our response, right? Because we may feel like, well, you were harsh with even asking me that question, right? So I think tone is important, even if we are offended. And we can also use this as a teaching moment for people too. Because sometimes, I should say a lot of times, people don't make the time to correct. And when we don't do that, it allows the person to think that that's okay. And they'll do it again. Right? Okay. Thank you, ladies. All right. Let's see the next one. Sorry about the commercials. Okay. Here's the next one. Yeah.
We gotta go. Yeah, let's take a selfie first. Hey, wanna be in the picture with us? Sure. Mwah. Aww. Great photo. Flawless. You're so pretty for a dark girl.
Pretty for a dark girl. Is that supposed to be a compliment? Well, it's not, and it hurts that people don't think my skin color is beautiful.
Let's go. Let's go.
Dark girl. What's happening here? So the first thing I observed, which you may not have because I've watched it so many times, but what's interesting to me is that all of those girls appear to be of color somewhat. So I find that interesting by itself. And once again, they seem chummy. They're putting on makeup. They're in the bathroom or somewhere in the mirror, getting ready to go out and have a good time. And would we find "you're pretty for a dark girl" to be offensive? That's a question.
I think that I would. To me, that scene looked like girls in the club and you start talking in the bathroom. You know what I mean? And to say, I know that colorism in the Black community is a thing, so that is where I would assume that that's coming from. It's something that just in my family, they've always, like pointed out, like, don't do that. So they do look all of color, but also, again, colorism. So that's what I think how that happened.
Yes. Anyone see this any other way? There's always at least one person, right? Jenna.
I don't see it much differently, but I noticed the aggression before she even said that "you're pretty for a dark girl." And it was in the comment of, do you want to take a picture with us? Because I'm like, aren't y'all all friends?
Right.
And if we are, then why wouldn't it be we're all in a picture together? Like, let's just take a picture versus, do you want to take a picture with us? It felt divided already.
Well said. You know, I didn't pick up on that one right away. Yes, I like that, Jetta. I like that a lot. Yes, I would agree with you. I would agree with you. Okay. All right. Here is the next one in the series.
With hotels and vacation rentals, Booking.com has something for everyone.
What up, Nassim?
Hey, what's up, man?
How you doing, man?
I'm good. Bin Laden. Oh, really?
We're just kidding, bro.
Yeah.
Bin Laden? I'm so sick of hearing stupid terrorist jokes. Doesn't matter what I do.
Now I will say for this one, I haven't had anyone. I'm teaching this course for 4 years and I utilize these vignettes. I haven't had anyone come up with a why or how that could be okay. Typically for this one, everyone's like, I really see no way around it. Right. So you know, the whole like Islamophobia, etc. Right. This kind of screams that. But again, right, they see with their friends. And then he was like, hey, you know, he, definitely caught that. And then the gentleman said, oh, I'm just kidding. Right. But something like that, people may not find funny at all. Right. So that one, that's not necessarily any way around it. And while I'm talking about that, I want to go back to the one with the ladies in the bathroom, because there was one time when I shared this, one of my students made a really good point. So I said, how would you react to that? She said, I would say, well, you're pretty for a light girl. And I said, oh, wow, interesting. So I was like, oh, that was witty. So if you're someone that has wit, you may be able to come at it from that perspective. And that too might stop someone to say, oh, wow, maybe I said something, that was offensive. Right. Okay. All righty. Any other comment on the Bin Laden one? I would love for someone to give me an opposite because no one has done that yet. Let's see. Okay, thank you. When you are a member of a marginalized group, a woman, a person of color, etc., it's easy to immediately assume questions like that infer that you didn't belong in a specific place, such as Colombia, etc. But asking more open-ended questions as to where the question comes from and what it actually intends to explore could be very helpful. However, some statements are bluntly microaggressive, and it's hard to assume the intentions behind didn't stem from a bias, conscious or not. Osama is a common Arabic name, so I could see how others, if also Arabic, could make a joke like that. Thank you so much. That was a lot said, and we hear you. And yes, I definitely agree with you for sure, particularly about being from a marginalized group and this whole piece around asking open-ended questions around, where did the question come from? I like that as well, because you give people, some room, in some cases to maybe trip themselves up or to maybe help themselves, one or the other. Okay. Thank you so much. All right. Next one. Go. This time. Turn it down till we get to the.
What does this mean?
Now see, I tried not to play. Tried not to play the sound and thought I was going to get a
You don't look Jewish.
video, and I didn't. Hold on, let me turn it back up. No.
What does this mean?
Oh, it's a chai, a Jewish symbol for life.
You're Jewish?
Yeah.
You don't look Jewish.
I don't look Jewish? What does that mean? What are Jews supposed to look like?
So looks like we have a couple here. What's happening? What was just experienced about the hive?
Like assumption based off how a person looks. Like how does a Jew look? You know, or like how does you have people who are like mixed race and like how am I supposed to look? Or misgendering, characterizing people based off looks.
Correct. You know, because it's difficult to say, like with all Asians look alike. Now you're saying you don't look Jewish. Like, well, what does a Jewish person look like, right? But at the same time, clearly they are quite chummy, right? Looks like a little bit of a in love type of situation here, right? So I'm going to assume he didn't mean to offend her. Hopefully not. But I think that could have been an opportunity, particularly if they're, you know, in an affair here, an opportunity for her to educate him, right, on, you know, how it means, and also, you know, that Jewish, you know, is also, you know, it's a religion, right? And really taking the time to educate him, particularly if it looks like they're going to be spending a little more time together. Might help him to know a little bit more about what that
I'd
means.
also say, sorry.
Go ahead.
I also say it's offensive as a couple that I'm Jewish and we're all chummy. You don't even know that basic fact about me.
Good point. Good point. Maybe that hadn't come up yet. So still learning and exploring, apparently. But a very good point. You would think that would have been explored already. Good point. Oh,
I have a question because I'm from Nigeria, right?
Yes.
And yes, there's a lot being done here in America about, you know, helping us to embrace our identity. But I know when I first moved here 20 something years ago, a lot of the ad would have light-skinned Black people. But now things are changing. So clearly what we are doing collectively is working, our advocacy and, you know, showing up as who we are. But I know in Nigeria, there's a lot of emphasis on light-skinned women. You know, they look more, according to the men, they're more attractive. And a lot of women over there are spending big sum of money buying cosmetics just to enhance their appearance, change their skin tone. And that's a huge problem because skin bleaching does have its problems. It may not come up now, but in the future, and they just feel like being my shade, it's not good enough. I have to look like Gisele or lighter. You know, to them, that's what's attractive, and it's sad. So I think what we're doing here is important, and each of us should continue to educate the young ones who are coming behind us.
Yeah. You know, and that gets into something else, right? You know, there's a beauty bias too, right? So for wherever you are, there is a standard of beauty, right? But who's creating that standard? I just came from a conference last week and that was talked about quite a bit, right? About how even as people of color, sometimes we are giving into these ways of being, right? So, like you said, even in Africa, in Nigeria, someone is saying, oh, this person's more beautiful, you know, because they're a lighter complexion. According to who? Where does that come from? Why is that the standard of beauty? Right? Why is it our standard of beauty? People that are, you know, why does color even matter? But that comes from a place, and it's not just perpetuated by, you know, people that don't look like us. It's perpetuated by people who look like us, because we're also being indoctrinated, right, into this fabric, because this is what we live in. And until we say, well, hey, I don't agree with that. And you're so right about, generally, if you saw people of color, you know, in commercials or actresses, a lot of times they're lighter complexion. And when I went to a session about this, then I started looking at everybody, because they were saying also people in leadership. So the whole conference, every time someone in leadership got up, I would look at them. I'm like, well, they are light complected, you know? So I was like, what's happening here? But I just started noticing it more. So it's really up to us, right? to turn that around. And it's unfortunate that we live in a culture where this beauty bias, has been this for years. And it gets into the mindsets of people. So it gets hard to change, right? But I think it's important for us to actually point that out. Whose yardstick are we using? Jenna.
I want to kind of explore more of what Aranola said, and I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But I noticed Aranola. One of the things I noticed is like that's the same in the Caribbean now. There's a lot of skin bleaching going on. And I often wonder if that's because of the lag in the information they get from us. Because I know there are times when they were 10 years behind on our TV shows and the things that we had going on. And even though we kind of changed here and we have more mixed race couples and we have more diversity in our commercials and our TV shows, they may not see that yet. And they may not see that change even in the world of everything's instant. They might still be seeing or just focused on like the reality TV shows and all those things. So I kind of wonder if there's just a lag in what they're seeing with our evolution.
Interesting. Could very well be. I think about here in St. Louis, I went on a history tour, and they were talking about Annie Malone, right, who was like a competitor to Madam C.J. Walker, and about the hair products, that both of them were selling. But also even during that time, skin bleaching was also happening as well, right? So it's so interesting that we're talking hundreds of years, right? That's still even going on today. And that for some reason, this light complexion is the standard of beauty, which, yeah, how did we get there? Right. Okay. Thank you, ladies. All right. Let's see.
Oh, no. That,
It is an ethos that is echoed in countless political speeches, works of literature, and films.
Sounds great, Diego.
Thank you.
You're so well spoken.
Thanks.
Where are your parents from again?
Guatemala. Why?
Because your English is so good.
My English is so good. I'm from here. I grew up speaking English and Spanish. Why don't people get that?
We may have a few people in this Zoom that might be able to relate to that one, so I'm not going to steal their thunder at all. I know in my classes, I have a number of African students, and other students are often surprised that they speak English, right? Even though that is part of their native language that they learned. So I'd like to hear from those that maybe aren't from the US about how this lands.
Hi, this is Jane.
Hi, Jane.
That's something I've come across often and even still do after some close to 30 years. They'll say, oh, you speak very good English. It's like, well, what kind of English am I supposed to be speaking? It's like, why would you expect me to speak anything other than good English? It's like, oh, you speak very well. I was just surprised. In the beginning, it surprised me that anybody would say that because it's English. We were born, we went to school speaking English. And, I'm talking to you. I'm with you in a university or whatever gathering it is. You must know that I'm here. I speak English. And it's like, they're surprised that you speak it. Not only that you speak it, but you speak it well.
Mm-hmm.
That I don't know, that continues to surprise me when people say it.
Mm-hmm. And also sometimes you may get the statement, oh, you're so articulate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've gotten that before. I was like, well, I would hope so, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, in the places and spaces that I'm in, I would hope so. Now, what's interesting about this, Jane, is I have had some students tell me that some of them take it as a compliment because for some of them, English isn't their first language. So if someone says you speak it well, they're like, oh, well, I thought that that was a compliment. I didn't realize that was a microaggression.
Yeah, that's very true. I agree. That's very true. Yep.
Well, I found that pretty interesting when the students started saying that. So again, when you run into or hear these microaggressions, there can be more than one side to the coin depending on people's perspective. Let me fix this now. I'm going to stop sharing and see your beautiful faces because that was the last video that I had. Okay, here we go.
Gisele,
yes.
What if something like that happened and you just stopped and you just looked at the person? You didn't say anything. Do you think that it would cause them, the offender, some pause?
I think it would, because I think they would probably feel like, why are you looking at me like that? Or they may catch themselves and say, "Ooh, I said something that might be offensive." So I think I like that. Just a turn and a stare. I think that's another method that you could use. You don't maybe have to say anything. Your eyes could say it all. And as we know, right, silence often speaks for itself. I like that, Ingrid.
Gisele, could you speak more on, you said earlier about taking the time to correct.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak more on how to do that especially after, the initial shock of it.
Right.
And, can you just speak more on how to come to
Yeah, so it is going to have to be in your style and what works for you. But for me, if I'm with a friend, I mean, I have no problem saying, you know what, I was offended by that. And let me tell you why. And most times people will say, oh, I didn't mean it that way. But oftentimes I think it'll land with them and they will very likely not do that again. So that's one way, to come at it. The other way is just to say, do you know that could be offensive to someone? And even if it's not you, right? Now that you've seen these vignettes, you could be the bystander that says, that could be offensive to someone. And maybe it's not offensive to Mary right here, but let me tell you why it could be. There is this book called What If I Say the Wrong Thing? And there was an example. It's by a lady named Renee Meyer. She's a lawyer, African-American woman. She still is the DEI leader at Netflix. So she wrote this book about all these different examples. And one that always, a few of them that I think are really interesting. She talks about, she's on a plane and there's some turbulence. And she hears like a woman's voice that comes over the loudspeaker saying, this turbulence. And she was like, oh, I sure hope she can drive. And then she caught herself because she was like, oh, and she's a woman herself, right? But she was able to catch herself and say, oh, that was offensive. Because sometimes we have our own biases, right, in ourselves. And sometimes that may eke out. So the other way is just also to be able to catch yourself in those situations. I always tell my students, no one should know you better than you know yourself. So you should know, kind of what your own biases are. And ideally be working on those. The other way that I think, is just pretty smooth. It could be, I think Jetta might have said this, how did you come to that conclusion? Right? Tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that. Or you can just do the turn and stare that Ingrid just recommended. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was the last vignette. I didn't want to slide you to death tonight, so I just thought I would bring some videos instead to keep it a little bit lively. And I think with this subject matter, it's helpful just to see examples. So hopefully you've walked away with two things tonight, right? First, understanding what is a microaggression, right? And then two, when Aranola said my introduction, she's so right, is that I always love to give people practical tips on how to do something, because so often we'll come into a forum like this. We go to a conference, we get the information, we write down notes, and then we are on to our day-to-day and we forgot what we learned. So I always try to give like something that you can use tomorrow. So if you see this tomorrow, you could easily say, tell me more about that. Or how did you get to that conclusion? Or turn and stare, right? You already know what to do. So hopefully this session has been helpful. And these are tools that you can use in your everyday life. And it doesn't have to even be at work. You could be at the grocery store. You could be anywhere where these microaggressions could actually occur. All right. So with that, any closing questions?
Yes, I think it's not only question. I may need a little bit of advice from you.
Okay.
Because my son is 18 years old, and I've met a lot of people who tell me that my English is so good and I'm not born here and I'm not from here, which to me, I've never been offended about it. I just laugh and I let it go. But my son, he has been complaining from his work, what they told him. They asked him where he come from, and he said, my parents are from Congo, but I was born here. And then they were like, oh, you speak good English. He was very offended about it because he was born here. So he is going to school. He has been going to school since he was little. Why would anybody say, oh, you speak good English? And he has been saying that over and over. I really don't know how I can comfort him. So I don't know if you can help me and give me some advice. What I told him is that I don't think if that should bother you, if they say that you speak good English, just explain to them that you were born here and you go to school here, so you know English. But it's not that he only knows English, he knows Swahili and he knows our native language too. So they're surprised, like, how can you know those other two languages at the same time you speak good English? And it's like they are even offending him more and they don't know. So I don't know how I can help him.
Right. So I think in that case, what we're dealing with is just ignorance, right? Where people just really don't know. So one, I think he, should be honest about, hey, I was born here, first of all. And he might not be comfortable because it's work. So it also has to be something that he's comfortable saying. But this is what you can advise. For him, first of all, just to come clean with, I'm from here, right? So you should expect me to speak English in a manner that, might resonate with how you hear English. Also, where I come from. Like just because my parents are from the Congo, you should know that English is, a language that most people in Africa do speak English. Because a lot of people do not know that is the case, that English is spoken in Africa. And to praise him, the fact that he speaks 3 languages, how much do you want to bet the people he's speaking to only speak 1? Right? So I think he can also just say, and I'm blessed also to be multilingual. What other languages do you speak? And I would like to take some insights from the audience as well. And I see V. Sibley has her hand up.
Hi, Gisele. It's Felina.
So I didn't see your face. And I thought it was you, but when you talked, I was like, that doesn't sound like Felina. Hey, Felina.
I'm a little more petty. So when they say you speak good English, I'm like, oh, yes, I do. Do you want me to teach you?
See, that's the wit and the humor. I like it, Felina. I like it. Jetta.
Mine is not so much in the response, but it's to help with coping. Because at that age, he probably doesn't value what parents have to say. So maybe pairing him with a mentor that is maybe in his similar, background could help him understand how to cope with it and how to work through it and also how to respond to it.
That's really good. You're right. Because I do, yeah, because this multi-generational component that we're dealing with, because we have like this 5 generations in the workplace today. You're right, because oftentimes to young people, parents are Charlie Brown. Womp, 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 no matter what we say, right? So very good point if you could pair him with someone that's in his age category. I like that a lot.
Thank you.
Welcome. We want him to be comfortable at work, and we don't want him to go to work mad.
True.
We don't want that. So with that, I have concluded the presentation I wanted to share with you today, and I will turn it back over to Arinola, our gracious hostess.
Awesome, awesome. Gisele, oh my God, I can't have enough of you. You've been so amazing. And I'm really grateful that a lot of our friends from All in Business School and the Archway chapter of Links, you're here with us. You know, it's so nice to have this connection. And honestly, this is how we learn. A lot of us here are leaders and champions in our own right. And we help each other grow. A lot of the nuggets I've gotten from here is on my notes phone here. I've been taking notes as you spoke. And I know that, for me, most of the examples you cited, many of us, we're living it daily, or we've experienced it in the past. 18 years ago, when I got pregnant and I announced it at my old office, one of my friends said to me, Arinola, your daughter is going to have a cute African accent. I was like, accent is not something you're born with, Karen. It's depending on where you're raised. And it's funny because it's somebody my own color. And that's why I love what we did with Bridging the Gap, because some of these stereotypes is just from not knowing. It's not because harm is intended. That friend now is very plugged into the African community. She loves fufu and egusi, and I don't think she would ever ask such question again. So I hope that, our friends here from the links would come back on board. Let's have a part 2 of Bridging the Gap between the African and African American community so we can educate ourselves. Because it has to start from us. This so-called skin lightening, not believing in our own tone. If we understand it and we can say yes together, we're going to teach the coming generation. That will make a difference. So please don't be far away. And we also have here our president from the African Chamber of Commerce, Dr. Linda, and we are having our 2nd annual gala. So please, if you've not heard about it, we are going to be sharing the flyer. We encourage you to come and support the African Chamber of Commerce. There's a lot that we're doing. Gisele has been in some of our African celebrations, and I see Dr.
amazing.
Ingo. Yeah,
they're always festive. They're fun. Yes. I like them because they're not the standard, the standard American gala reception. I've had too many of those, so I'm very refreshed when I go to yours. And please read Dr. Linda's comment. She made a comment about the student that was just spoken about.
Okay, Dr. Linda, he can offer to give them private lessons on any of the language that he speaks. It could boost his confidence that way as well. Yes, I love that.
That's lovely.
Yes, I love that. Thank you, Dr. Linda.
Thank you, Dr. Linda.
Yes, and Kimberly said, this was wonderful, Gisele. I truly enjoyed your presentation. I do too. Such an important conversation to be had. Yes. Thanks for a very interesting perspective. Is my glasses working? That's Joanne. So we appreciate you all for giving your time, Gisele. We cannot thank you enough. But let's continue this. Yes. It's needed and it's helping. It's healing and it's bringing us together as one Black community.
Yes.
So
which is
happy.
Important.
Yes. Happy International Women's Day. And Elizabeth, I'm going to turn it over to you if there's any other announcements, but we will be sharing the gala flyer and I'll be personally inviting some of you. So please join, support us, and come and see what we do and have a taste of some African delicacies. You will love it. Yes, you will love it. Thank you very much. Elizabeth?
Hi, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Arinella, for facilitating, and thank you so much for Gisele for being a presenter. I'm Elizabeth, and I work with Geoffrey at Vitendo for Africa, and we're very much appreciative to all of you for attending and everything. So I'll be going over some of the events that we're having that are coming up. I'll be sharing my screen in a few minutes. So the first events that we have is the African Single St. Louis. It's actually tomorrow on Zoom. It's gonna be for people that are over 35 years of age. So please, if you know anyone who's interested in the meeting, we're gonna be sharing out the Zoom link. And also if people wanna scan the code, it's on the flyer. So please, if you know anyone is interested, you can share the flyer and everything. The next meeting that you have is the Teen Mental Health First Aid. We're gonna be starting it on Friday from March 14th. It's gonna be from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. It's gonna be for 3 days. So this one is mainly for the high schoolers who are in school. We want them to learn about mental health first aid because we know they're going through a lot right now. So this class will be very helpful to them. And then we also have our dental program. It started on last week. So on Friday is gonna be the second day. It's gonna be from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Our facilitator is gonna be Dr. Ishani. She's a dentist. She'll be going over the dental careers that they offer and also like the scholarship opportunities that people can sign up for. So please, if you know have any kids who may be interested in a dental career, please have them join us from Friday. And then we're also having an immigration forum second series with Nalini Mahadevan. It's gonna be next week on Wednesday from 6 p.m. So she'll be going over the current immigration changes because and also like the green card status, visas, and also like the status for the international students who are currently here because there's a lot of changes in this new government. So please, we encourage all of you to join us for that. And we're also going to be having an Easter egg hunt in April 19th from 12 p.m. at the Bomas of Dairo. So that one is mainly for the elementary and middle school children. And also like that one, we're going to be charging $15 so that we can buy snacks for the kids, a few games, and also like the eggs so that they can have a great time. And then that's it for the events that we have. Please, you can be updated on our social media platforms, on our website, and also on Facebook or Instagram. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you everyone again. This wonderful discussion was brought to you by Vitendo for Africa, the Archway chapter of the Links Incorporated, Orlean Business School, and Missouri Career Development Association. So thank you all for joining, supporting, and helping to impact the minority community and communities in general. Without much ado, thank you all, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, Gisele. You were amazing.
Bye-bye. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.